So Life Outrage just posted, school is a scam. And I'm going to summarize the video. I'll put the original video in the link in the description below, followed by my thoughts. He basically says that, hey, you're waking up every day when you're young. And at the same time, and then let's say you're eating at the same time, getting breaks at the same time. And essentially what happens, right? You're basically being conditioned to do what? To follow a routine, to basically follow the leader. In other words, you're being trained for the future. In other words, the kind of typical corporate world or 9 to 5 kind of world where your teacher is basically like your boss. To speak, you gotta, raise your hand, you gotta ask permission. Basically, it's about obedience and being controlled without realizing it, hopefully, that you're being controlled. So starting from a young age, you're basically conditioned to be slave is a strong word, but basically you're gonna be good slave, fancy slave, and these type of things. And so longer term, what happens is he basically says that, okay, so you're just a number basically. If you get, let's say 60%, that's passing, for example, based on his experience for his school system or what have us. But in the end, if you want to go to a top tier college, it's known that, hey, 60% may be passing, but it's not excellent. And in the end, to be excellent, in other words, to have money, you need to be having these excellent scores, and everything boils down to a number. And to actually live, you need money. And to have money, you need to basically obey and follow this system. And if you want to be out of it, that basically is the whole point of the video, where school is a scam, because even if you follow it through, the end of the video ends up as, okay, well, you're just a number. You're not better than other people. You're just literally in the ocean of everyone. You're just one more person. There's no guarantee, simply put. And my response to all of this is Life Outrage. I don't agree with a lot of things that are said. But here, school equaling a scam, I would say it's spot on in terms of exactly what the output is. But I also personally have went to the best engineering school in the world. And so if I'm saying school is a scam, I want to explain exactly the viewpoint of where it can make sense, but also where I got lucky in my life, which I think if Life Outrage had my, experience of life or history, then he, would definitely maybe not be making the same videos that he's making on the channel right now. So here's my thoughts, right? I agree. You're basically young, you're impressionable, what they call it moldable, so why are they trying to do all these things when you're young? If you've ever realized, it's kind of like, oh, because they're the most able to be influenced. You tell a kid to do something, they just may copy like a monkey, right? Like, hey, raise your hand, how you eat food, how you literally communicate. As a baby, you're just kind of taking in those inputs without any filter, and so is the output, right? Like whatever happens, happens. And so school is basically what? The origin of school basically is, if you look at Henry Ford's story or how like Ford Motors came to be, it was basically like, all right, dude, you can do great things in this world, right? But back then, without any standardization, without any institutionalization, which is basically what school is, right? School is like a prison, like other things, and I'll get there in a sec, where basically, like an institution, you have processes. So corporate America runs on business processes, right? And what are these processes? These processes are nothing but doing things in a certain way, like cogs in a machine, if you've heard that expression, or robots or coding, right? If this, then that. So it's basically very like no creativity, no real like soul, you could say, right? It's rules-based system, simply put. So with school, you're basically just taught to follow, and then eventually you keep following, and the best follower is, oh yeah, the best follower, like the hall monitor, the nerds, or the guy who gets 100, the people who work really hard and who are the smartest, they don't get paid the most, because school is about identifying who is the smartest, so that if I'm wealthy at the top, I can use your brain to basically make me more money, or like me not doing any work, you go do the work, and the amount of money I'm willing to pay you, and it's normalized to pay even the smartest individual, you tell me basically, go Google it online. If you take out stock equity, that if you're a CEO, for example, like what is that salary where you can get, let's say 50 mil cash, like as a salary? It basically doesn't exist unless you get like stock options, and then that company has to do well, and then you have to sell at the right time. And there's obviously pressure if you sell as a C-suite member, because it's like, oh, you don't believe in the own company that you're running and all these things. So there's a lot of nuance, right? But in short, Henry Ford needed skilled labor. His cousins, his family, whatever wasn't enough. So what did he do? Basically him, and if you look at Carnegie Mellon's story and just all of that history, out of the scope of this video, is basically saying, okay, how do you identify people to do the thing? So if you need someone who's like a blacksmith, a welder, someone with, trade school today, we call it, right? Those type of skill sets, you get those people, and you can have 9 kids as your farming family. What if you need 1,000 people of labor? So that's where college was eventually, that, after school and there's a next step and there's a next step and it's all this BS, right? To do what? It's nothing but a feeder into people who need resources. It's just like literally like, hey, you're saving up back in the day when you're a kid, maybe you want an Xbox or a Game Boy or PS2 or whatever, right? You're saving up, your allowance if you had some, or, you go sell lemonade and, you have side hustles. I used to clean dishes, I used to get paid handsomely for $15 an hour. To me was like a ton of money for cleaning the dishes of somebody else's, not like, chores within my family or anything. Point being, you're having a goal, right? You're saving to get the thing. And in this case, you have the capability, you have the technology, let's say in this case, to create the cars, but now you need the labor. So how do you get human capital, right? I hate that phrase, but it's the truth, right? And how you get it is basically these type of feeder things like schools and then college. And there was an inflection point where everything was perfect, right? Where like, oh, okay, the perfect amount of labor, enough salary, everyone's happy, perfect economy, right? Like I wasn't alive during that time, but we keep hearing back then was great. And today everyone's saying it's crap. And we already know tomorrow, which is a different video, which I want to respond to from Life Outrage of why he doesn't want to have kids. Like we just assume the future is basically donezo, right? It's not a good time. So all of that to say, what I think, my experience, if he had it, things would change is I'm just another human. And just like another human, everyone has their experiences. I had the opportunity in my puberty years to go to school with multimillionaires and billionaire families. I'm not from that cloth, but it was just a happenstance. It was an international school, English speaking. A lot of Americans were going to India, so I went to India for high school. And in India, it was basically all the Indian Americans who are, let's just say, kind of average over here. And over there, it's like top wealth of wealth, like politicians, celebrities, all the things. And how I saw them treat the teachers, how I saw them care about their like grades in school and all these things, it didn't matter. Because in the end, the expectation was, hey, you're going to go into the same industry due to the connections we have through our network. So this all is nonsense. Like you don't need to study and stuff like this. But the reason they go to these schools is because just like college is like a networking kind of, bubble of, oh, you're going to meet people and keep up with them. And there's a lot of fake stuff as well, just for resources, right? Like people will network to get jobs, but it's not like they care about the other person. So it's kind of like, it's its own topic, man. Like I have my qualms with networking. Let's put it like that. Like if you're not genuine, it's kind of like, okay, are you really going to help me if you take all of what's at stake off the table, right? And chances are those people are just like grifters. They get what they want and then they screw off, right? So these wealthy individuals, it's not about them being bad people or lazy or all these things. The truth is what? Honestly, if you think about it, there's no reason for them to care about school. So they wouldn't listen to the rules. They wouldn't follow them. They would push back. They would be like, my father is like, my family is like, you get fired, teacher, because screw you. And honestly, after seeing that and juxtaposing it with everything we see of the control for the peasants or really the average people that are just not as wealthy or not as poor, you realize like, dude, none of this stuff is real. Like school taught me habits, which eventually, got me to the best engineering school in the world. But in the end, I call myself, let's say, a fancy slave. Now, that is at the level of if you're going to be a worker for life. I have a different mindset, more entrepreneurial and more business focused and just overarching like what I'm willing to do. And so the habits of school of being like the guy who listens and does the thing, right? Taking those habits instead of using them for someone else's profit when you know how the scam of school is, right? You can use it for yourself. And there's no guarantee, right? Because it's all about who you know in the end. They always say, right? Don't sell to the masses if you want to be rich. If you want to be rich, help wealthy people solve really expensive problems. And you're just that person who's facilitating in the middle or actually solving said problem. So all in all, school, it's a scam. But it's a scam in the sense of it's an institution where most people don't even know that they're in the institution. Hence the feeling of scam. It's like being in the prison without realizing, oh man, I'm in prison. You know what I mean? And so if you don't know, you don't know. And then later you get to know and you're like, damn, if I really had full agency and full thought, why would I go, let's say, to college? Why would I even go to school, right? But in society, you make up a lot of rules, right? To say like by the time you're 18, like if you didn't go to school, then you're probably going to be barbaric. You don't know grammar. You don't know how to read, write, like simple maths. And like you can learn all that by the age of whatever, right? 6, 7, 8, 9. And honestly, as long as you're meeting proper people, you will be proper. And that's the same reason why when schools in poor areas, everyone turns out to be still fighting for the same minimum wage jobs in the poor areas. They can't get out. They blame each other. They fight within each other. The government doesn't care because there's no incentive to help people at the bottom of the barrel. And then they'll say there's government programs and welfare and EBT and food stamps and all these child tax credits, like all this stuff to help folks get out of that situation. But the truth is, it was never meant for someone to actually succeed, right? It's all just a supplement. It's all a subsidy kind of thing. It's all, hey, I'll support you, but I'm not going to actually help you like someone who really wants to help step by step. So yeah, we're all numbers, and school tries to base numbers for value. And in the future, people are like, oh, I have so much money, so I have this much value, or I've created this much value, so I'm worth X, Y, Z. But it's all like nothing's real, right? So if school is a scam, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying, if not school, right, what else would it be? And what could be that better version of getting to the future that Life Outrage wants, where if you don't work or do anything and you want everything, like that's great, right? I love that too. But I'm not saying to work harder, because that's also a scam of its own. Like, you don't need to work harder. You just literally need to, perfect world, we're all in unison. What happens? All kumbaya, everyone helping each other, and everything's great. But just like we're humans, if humans are parasites, in other words, if we don't eat at least once a day or drink at least X amount of water, in 72 hours, and you're going to die. Like, these are real things, like scientifically speaking. Now, I'm not going to test that, and you're probably not going to either. But assuming that's true, what happens? We need resources either from each other or from somewhere. And there's a reason why, like, gold mines, iron mines, and all these, like, oil, gas, like the petrodollar, like, look at Saudi. We never say anything as America or the world, because the world's energy is from a small place, but it's the wealthiest because why? Energy. That really is what it is. It's all about energy/resources, where money is just this, conduit, if that's the word, or this placeholder for value, but it's not real. Because if you have all the money in the world, infinity, you're the richest, but there's no more oil. That's like the true COVID. Like, when there's no activity, no economic like stimulation. If there's no oil or gas or like electricity, which comes from, I know there's other ways of making power, like hydroelectric power and wind power and like all this stuff, right? But like a realistic, the way we're doing things at the level we're doing it, like a standard of living of the world, I'm just saying it right now. That's really the truth, right? That's the real power, if you want to put it like that. So indirectly, if you just have access to oil and these things, you could do a whole lot of nothing. But the whole thing is, there's people and institutions within those people, or like groups literally, that are not wanting other people to enter their market, because humans are such, right? We can say they're selfish, we can say whatever, but a parasitic just logic, right, would be what? Consume as much as you can. And if other people don't consume, that's usually not you don't care. If you don't care, you don't care, right? You're just going to consume. Now, if you want to create for others, that's great, but you still had to have your keep. And that's the big, kind of simple but big difference, where somebody could create infinity, but if they're not able to consume their keep, if it's just given away totally, they're not going to create that much longer, right? They're still going to need to consume at some point. School, yeah, it's a scam. So Life Outrage, I always wonder what you think if you even watch these videos. But for anyone watching, it's the truth, man. Like, it can be a scam, but there's no choice, because they enslave you to send your kid basically to school. And, a friend of mine, her son has to not miss school 10 days in a row. And if they do, it's like legally not allowed or some BS. It's basically jail, right? Like, that's the whole point, is to feed them into the system. That's how they control you. And the whole family narrative and all these things, like, that's also not real. Like, if you want to have kids, do it for yourself. But the system, they love for you to sign a contract for marriage, just so when it's over, you're basically redistributing what? Child support, alimony. And if that's not the case, like, it's all a way to tax you from a financial standpoint, because your time, overall is spent to make money holistically, right? If you're not like trading, or if you don't have like a scalable way, or not leveraging human capital, in other words, like having other people do stuff on your behalf, right? For money, where you're getting X amount of money, you're paying somebody else, some of that money, but not all. And so you're basically getting a cut in the middle, which is every business ever to some degree, right? So you just have to choose which side you're on, where, yeah, once the scam is realized and you're like, dang, if I joined an MLM, right? Like, what's next? You don't just stay in the MLM. So in other words, if you go back to school, that's fine. If you have no other skills, labor, connections, like you have nothing going for you, great. But if there's a will, there's a way. And usually it's going to be people and who that get you to what you're trying to do, as long as you have some value to provide, and vice versa, right? So Life Outrage, I'm not really against what you've said. I would just challenge, what is that next step? It always is the next step, because it comes off like, all right, here's the complaint, but what's the resolution, right? Like other people are getting hurt by what you have to say. But if I'm talking right now and I'm making sense, like I'm also saying, what is the actual solution? The solution is going to be like, okay, step one is over. So what is next? And how can I, not be in this situation, or else it's always going to be like this. If we do nothing, nothing will change. But if we do even one small step, I'm not going to BS us and say it's going to be, a huge ripple effect, but it's more than doing nothing. And if you do a lot of changes with some discipline and habit, which they teach in school, I know I sound like contradicting myself, right? But you can use those skills to do better. And honestly, I could have learned more skills if I didn't go to school. I'll be honest about that too. So all of this to say, if you came this far, I really didn't want to make this video longer than Life Outrages, which was like 19 minutes change. So I'm going to stop this abruptly right now. Thanks for coming today and subscribe, like all the things, comment. See you in the next one. Peace.